Okay, so welcome back. And so for this week, we're going to be looking at the Yellow Peril, Chinese Exclusion Act, and Japanese American incarceration. It's a very large and topic as well. When we look at these different sort of portrayals of Asian Americans, right? Prior to this notion of like the model minority, excuse me. And so we have the Yellow Peril, which is this fear that's stoked by the possibility of an Asian takeover. And this takeover was not only through a military takeover, but as a takeover of jobs, bringing diseases and culture too. So make sure that you kind of look through this and seeing how like Yellow Peril is sort of exists even today, right? If not even more, because of the pandemic that a lot of us had experienced, in 2020. And so there's a lot of anti-Asian sentiments that definitely were highlighted during this period, and it really stems from this notion of yellow peril that we see. Giving us a historical background on this, right? We want to look at some of the general details of the Chinese Exclusion Act too, and it was based on nationality, right? Where folks from China were basically, not allowed to enter the United States given certain stipulations. And so it lasted for 10 years and it extended for another 10 years by the 1892 Geary Act. So it was enacted in 1882, which also required that people of Chinese origin carry identification certificates or face a deportation. So we have these issues that kind of continue to sort of come to fruition as a result. And later measures that are placed a number of other restrictions on Chinese, such as limiting their access to bail bonds and allowing entry to only those who were teachers, students, diplomats, and tourists. And again, we have this sort of exclusionary act, which is actually the first sort of immigration policy that the United States really saw, was an exclusionary policy. So just keep that in mind, right, of like what that really means in terms of like even immigration policy. This is what it's rooted in. Okay, so what I wanted us to do was just look at this and the Chinese Exclusion Act, but also really think about this more critically through how there's like this anti-Asian sort of sentiments that are happening within the United States, right? So really exclusionary and sort of looking at Asians as this larger threat, this yellow peril, right, that we see, and how that moves us into this notion of Japanese incarceration even. So the Chinese and Japanese were a lot of the sort of folks that were coming over from Asia at the time, and seeing how we have this sort of notion of yellow peril that exists not only within sort of this thought process of taking away jobs and they're a threat in that sort of sense, where Asians are taking away jobs and whatnot, but rather how Japanese incarceration really is a formidable piece of understanding that, hey, Japanese Americans were actually viewed as a threat because they were looked at as spies of Japan, especially during World War II, right? And so this is kind of this notion that we see during World War II, where you see about 120,000 Japanese Americans were incarcerated. So the videos, will help sort of highlight this. And so I really wanted us to sort of take a moment to just, have those videos really help us explain some of these horrific policies that really was the start. Was like the starting point for what we see with immigration policy, right? It wasn't all about being welcoming. If not, it was about being exclusionary, right?